See me. Mine must be somewhere.
God has bailed on us like yesterday. We'd had a full house.
Yeah.
I'd like to call to order this meeting of the West Virginia Board of Education for Wednesday, March 12th, 2025. We will begin with the Pledge of Allegiance led by Mrs. Sullivan.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States
States of America.
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And we will begin with introductions, and we'll begin with Mr. Wooten.
Good morning, Greg Wooten, Logan County.
Good morning, Chris Stansberry, Kanawha County.
Deborah Sullivan, Kanawha County.
Scott Rotrock, Monongalia County.
Vic Gabriel, Harrison County. Bob Dunleavy, Ohio County.
Kathy Justice, Greenbrier County.
Paul Hardesty, Logan County.
And I'm Nancy White from Harrison County as well. Superintendent Black, would you please introduce your staff?
Yes, good morning. Deputy White, do you want to begin?
Sonia White, Deputy Superintendent.
Vaughn Rudy, Director of Assessment.
Alexandra Croner, Director of Accountability.
Mark Moore, Office of Communications.
Dave Cartwright, Infrastructure and Network Operations.
Tina Payne, Executive Assistant, Legislative Liaison, and Secretary of the Board.
Kelly Talbot, General Counsel.
Thank you all and welcome to everyone. Next item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda. Is there a motion to approve? Second? Moved by Mrs. Sullivan, seconded by Dr. Stansberry. Any discussion? All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next item is delegations. Ms. Day.
Good morning, President White, Vice President Gabriel, members of the board, and Superintendent Blatt. We have 3 delegations this morning. We'll start with William K. Simmons, and he's going to discuss the topic of improving West Virginia achievement scores. Mr. Simmons.
Thank you, and good morning. The difficulty that I had was compressing 5 hours of comments into about 4 or 5 minutes. I ran into a local judge not long ago, and he said, you know, you and President Gee are canceled out. You're the canceled out crowd. I said, well, what do you mean? He said, well, you're fringe people now because you use common sense and you have integrity. And I said, well, that was where we came from. That was our educational background. And he and I are good friends, and we've talked a lot about how we can improve public and higher education. One of the things that I think we have to do, if we understand our present situation, we have to know the past. I have 50 years of experience, everything from 7th grade spelling to chancellor of the higher education system. I got my real education, though, when I was talked into running for school board. Because I'd trained teachers for years, thought we were doing a good job. I got on the school board and got out in today's classroom, and I decided classrooms have changed. What we were training for 15 or 20 years ago, that's not getting it today. So I developed a program, a 5-year program, which I called a Teacher Training Academy. And it also involved recruiting teachers because I think that today's teacher faces a lot of obstacles that I didn't face when I taught. It requires patience, it requires skill, requires a knowledge of counseling. I watched kids get off school buses that hadn't been home. They stayed somewhere with a neighbor or a relative and came to school that morning. They're frustrated and they're angry and they need special care. And I think that this is something that we have to address. Now, the decline in achievement scores, I've been after this for years. This is not an anomaly that just occurred. And this is something that's fixable. Dr. Gee and I offered last year his 55 years and my 50 years. We'll be glad, along with a lot of other people out of public schools who have proven records, to be a sounding board, to give pointers how we can improve our performance in reading and in writing and in basic math. It's not rocket science, folks. It takes a commitment. I appeared before House and Senate Education a little over a year ago. It was a joint meeting. And I was asked if I supported public schools or charter schools. I'm a public school person. I believe in public schools. The state of West Virginia's Constitution mandates an efficient and effective public school system. When I was chancellor of the higher education system, legislators reminded me that they had a constitutional obligation to fund public schools, but not colleges and universities, which was true. With that mandate and with the accountability that goes with it, my suggestion is that we strengthen our public school system. When you look at how we're divided, we're a small state, but we're a varied state. I've been in every community in West Virginia, and we're many places. Many places. You can go to Webster County and cross one mountain over into another valley, and you get another culture. You have to know that. Go to Logan County and you're in one area, you go to Harpers Ferry and you're in another. We have to understand that. But we still have young people who need basic education. I look at our forefathers in the one-room schools, 1 through 8. That gave the population a basis upon which they could operate in a society. And I don't care if you're in vocational education or academic education, you need a certain skill in reading and writing and computation in order to be successful. I have a friend who has a metal fabrication business. He got a lot of contracts, so he hired 2 additional employees. He found out very quickly that they couldn't read well enough and know enough math to transfer what was on blueprints onto metal. So he hired a math teacher to come in and help them. And they quit because they said they weren't going to have to learn anything they didn't learn in school. But they had to know enough to do the job that was required. When you look at where we are now, who benefits from this division of charter schools and public schools? An old politician told me one time, something's happening and you don't understand what or how. Back off far enough and ask one question: who benefits from this? Well, I don't know who benefits from it. Our kids don't, you all don't, our state doesn't. Who does benefit, and what is the benefit? A lot of money in public schools and a lot of power. You need that money and you need that power. And
Sir,
I'm
if
here
you
to
would
tell you that there are
wrap
a
it
lot
up
of
now.
people who'd like to see you say, we don't want to be 48th. Let's be 30 or 35 in 5 years. You'll have more support than you can imagine. And I'm going to be one of them.
Thank you, sir.
The next delegation is Tara Ramo, speaking on the topic of truth.
Good morning. The book of Jonah, chapter 3 and chapter 4, verses 1 to 2, circa 760 BC. Then the word of the Lord came to Jonah the second time, saying, Arise, go to Nineveh, that great city, and call out against it the message that I tell you. So Jonah arose and went to Nineveh, according to the word of the Lord. Now Nineveh was an exceedingly great city, 3 days' journey in breadth. Jonah began to go into the city, going a day's journey, and he called out, Yet 40 days, and Nineveh shall be overthrown. And the people of Nineveh believed God. They called for a fast and put on sackcloth, from the greatest of them to the least of them. The word reached the king of Nineveh, and he arose from his throne, removed his robe, covered himself with sackcloth, and sat in ashes. And he issued a proclamation and published through Nineveh, by the decree of the king and his nobles, let neither man nor beast, herd nor flock, taste anything. Let them not feed or drink water, but let man and beast be covered with sackcloth, and let them call out mightily to God. Let everyone turn from his evil way and from the violence that is in his hands. Who knows? God may turn and relent and turn from his fierce anger so that we may not perish. When God saw what they did, how they turned from their evil way, God relented of the disaster that he had said he would do to them, and he did not do it. But it displeased Jonah exceedingly, and he was angry. And he prayed to the Lord and said, O Lord, is not this what I said when I was yet in my country? That is why I made haste to flee to Tarshish, for I knew that you are a gracious God and merciful, slow to anger and abounding in steadfast love and relenting from disaster. Kyrie eleison. Amen.
Our final delegation is Mickey Blackwell with West Virginia Principals Association.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Mickey Blackwell with West Virginia Principals Association. And I'd just like to say, since we have so few delegations today, I'll just stay here for a while, if that's all right with you. Every time we get a prayer, and I'm not here to debate whether we need prayer or not, but every time there seems to be a message that relates to where we are. And certainly a time of courage and a time to go and speak out for beliefs there is no greater time than where we are. I had the pleasure of being with the Vice Principals Association this past week up in Morgantown. We had a 3-day conference up there. We had Gordon Gee. I heard one of our speakers refer to him. We had Dr. Stewart from West Virginia Tech there. We had Drew McClanahan, Hannah Cooper from here. We had a lot of great folks. And the most important message we got was, how can we help our kids? You know, that's what everybody wants to say, is how can we help our kids? The key is what method do we choose? Do we choose a method of fear and intimidation, or do we choose a method of embracing others and making sure that everyone has a place within a school? And it calls for a time of courage when there's a large majority that seems to think that hoarding resources from public schools and that there's a time to make sure that we are all the same and that we are granted equality simply by being birthed instead of our circumstances. So I hope for everyone's sake that we look for the big picture, that we look for what we're doing, that we don't try and fire our way into success. I never met an organization that got better when they got rid of their employees. And I hope that we look at investing our money in our public schools where our investments belong, where our taxpayers belong. I spoke to a lady yesterday. She said she had her child in a church school that's near where I live. And I said, well, what made you decide to do that? And she said, well, I got $5,000 from the government. Why not? And I said, well, why? You're not answering that question. Why? Why is that such a good idea? And she said, well, it's close to home. And she said, I like some of those folks. And I said, we discussed curriculum and we discussed a lot of things and to be able to transfer credits to high school and the college level. And she said, well, these are questions that I didn't know. And I said, well, money well spent. And I hope we have her on the right road, and I hope her son is in public school back where he belongs next year. I worry how many folks are out there, who are following the herd. I heard that again. Who are following the herd and not learning what is necessary for what's best for us all. Democracy is best for us all, but democracy tempered with justice and fairness and recognition that we all need a hand up every now and then, that we're not all born with 2 silver spoons, and that some of us don't even have a spoon, would be very helpful during these times. I would like to say congratulations to all of those teachers who received their National Board certification. That is a great honor. I cannot stress that enough. When I was principal, we had Dr. Ray Singleton, who is a coordinator of the National Board certification here locally, and we were lucky enough to have 25% of all the National Board certification teachers in Kanawha County at our school. You get a lot done when the boss is there, and he was the boss of that program, and you can really bring it on. But I applaud every teacher who goes through that process to make themselves better, to improve their skills, and to learn more about what to do. Those are the folks we need to be focusing on. Those are the folks we need to be supporting. I would also like to wish everyone a great weekend at the Civic Center for the girls basketball tournament. That's always so much fun, and I hope everybody has an opportunity to go there and enjoy that. They're from all over. I know the coaches. Some of those folks were, I was lucky enough to have a couple of those coaches who are still in the playoffs involved at our school, and I'm just very proud of them. And I want to say, for all of you and all of you listening across the state and over in that big gold building, that when you are at the girls basketball tournament this weekend, have a hot dog and have some popcorn and cheer like crazy for the home team, and know that you are watching something that was funded by Title IX programming. And let's not forget that federal funding and federal programming have created great many good things. I'm an English teacher and I understand how that sentence just sounded. But just let me say that when you are watching that, you're watching diversity in action, equity in action, and inclusion in action simply by the fact that they are working within the Title IX to have a wonderful tournament there. I invite everybody to go. I invite everybody to root them on. March is Women's History Month. I invite everybody to get some books and to read the internet and to educate yourself about Women's History Month and what we can all do to recognize. And I just again hope that we can treat our schools and our children and our staff with dignity and professionalism in a way that everyone would like to be taught. It would be a great thing if we come out of this a more united and inclusive organization. So I want to thank you all and thank you for the opportunity to speak. Thank you.
And there are no more delegations.
Thank you. Next on the agenda is the consent agenda. Is there a motion to approve?
Move to approve.
Moved by Mr. Hardesty, seconded by Mr. Wooten. Any other discussion? Those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. New business. First item on the new business agenda is a demonstration of View My Assessment Results portal for students and parents. Mr. Rudy.
Thank you, President White, Vice President Gabriel, members of the board, Superintendent Blatt, and distinguished guests. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you this morning. My name is Vaughn Rudy. I'm the Director of Assessment here at the Department of Education. And as we all know from the nice weather we're seeing outside in the past couple of days, spring is just around the corner. And of course, with spring comes the warmer weather, the blooming flowers, the singing birds, and the statewide Summit of Assessment. In less than a month, the statewide window for the West Virginia General Summit Assessment in grades 3 through 8 will open. This year's window for the WVGSA runs from April the 7th until May the 23rd. Now, of course, kids aren't testing every single day, like some people think that they are when we talk about this big wide window. Each county will set its own testing schedule within that overall window. Now, in the past, although counties and schools could see their assessment results before the end of the school year in the reporting system that they have access to, students and parents had to wait until the start of the next school year before they would know how their students scored on the test, unless they went into the school and said, hey, I want to have a conference, and that way. But most of the time, they would wait until they would get those paper reports. If you remember the old paper reports that we used to print and provide, and then the counties would get them, they would gather them up, distribute them to the schools would distribute them to the students in a variety of ways. They might send them in the mail. They might give them to the students to take home. They might give them to them at parent-teacher conferences. But very often they would have to wait until that fall or until the August when they went back to school. But I'm pleased to announce that things will be different this spring. For the West Virginia General Summit of Assessment in grades 3 through 8, shortly after students complete a content area test, the students and their parents will be able to log into an online portal and view their results. In fact, in most cases, the scores will appear the next day. For example, a student takes the math test on Tuesday. That student and his or her parents will be able to log in to see how the student's math scores were within 24 hours the next day. The same would be true for students who take the science test. Now, there is a little bit of a caveat with our English language arts test because the overall English language arts score is combined from the performance on the English language arts reading test and the English language arts writing test. So both of those tests have to be completed and scored before their ELA scores will show up. So that's something that we'll work with the counties and schools to communicate out to their parents. In some cases on the writing test, if a student's response is flagged, it might be routed to hand scoring for verification of the scoring, and that might take a little bit longer. But still, they're going to be able, before the end of the school year, to be able to go in and see all of their test scores. And like I said, in many cases, it may be the very next day after they've completed a content area test. Now what I'd like to do is to give you a little demonstration of what the site looks like, what the portal, what parents will do. So there will be a login entry page like this. It will look a little bit different because I'm doing the demo site to show you with Demo Student. Now, I've already, thanks to Dave, we're able to put the access code in. Each student will have a unique access code that will be provided. The schools will provide that to the parents. In fact, we actually started this portal a couple of years ago, just like a soft launch. We still gave out the printed reports. Last year, we stopped printing the reports. Now, some counties chose to print reports and send them home. That was up to them, and they'll still be able to do that as well. But for us, we wanted to try to guide parents and students to this portal. And so that became available in this past August to get their scores from last spring, but they weren't available till the spring. This year, they're going to be available, they weren't available till the fall. This year, they're going to be available earlier. So they'll take that access code. And in fact, the students that received an access code this past fall will be able to use the same access code that they have, that they received. That will change next year in August. They'll have to enter the birth date of the student and the student's first name. So in this case, let's just imagine that I have a child named Gary, He's in the 5th grade, so I've got this information up here. I'm going to scroll down here and click sign in. Now, because of the screen size, it's a little difficult. Depending on the screen size, they may see all of them on the same screen, or they may have to scroll down. In this case, Gary's in the 5th grade, and there's also a little, when new scores show up in the system, there'll be a little notice at the top so that when the parents and the students log in, they'll be able to know, hey, there's new scores that are appearing here. And when I scroll down, here it is. You can see that Gary's science score is showing up. So he's already completed the science test. His ELA score is showing up. He's already completed the ELA test. That means he's taken both the reading and the writing test. And then down below, here's the mathematics test. Now, whatever test appears first is going to be based upon whatever test was taken last. So in this case, Gary most recently took the science test. That's why science is first. And then we have the ELA test over here. You can see this just gives a big glimpse, and they can see their scores right away. You know, how the student scored on the science test. Here's the score, but they can also see what achievement level that the student fell in. Same thing with ELA and same thing with math. Now, what this tells me, just looking at this, my student, Gary, did pretty well in science. He's in the exceed standard category, shows where his scale score is based on the scale. Struggled a little bit in ELA. He's down in the does not meet standard, but he did meet the standards for math. This will give parents an idea of where their students are at that particular point. All right, so this gives you this will give students or parents the big glimpse. Now, if I click on View All Test, where's my mouse? Is there. I'm going to click on View All Tests. Now what I see is across the board, it starts to show each test individually. So we have a tab for the ELA, a tab for the math, and a tab for the science. Because I'm an ELA guy, I'm going to focus on ELA because there's similar information that will appear on each of these tests or each of these tabs. So here we have the ELA test. Now, not only do I see the overall score, but I can also see how the student performed on the writing assessment, what scores they received there. If I went across to mathematics, I would see the same information. Of course, there's no writing test there. And then the same thing for the summative. This particular screen gives them the similar information that they saw on the home screen when they first log in. But this does allow them to break down the individual reports. Dave, can you make that screen a little smaller? I think that's good. Yeah, that's good. All right, so now again, the parents will be able to adjust the size so they can see what they want to see on it. Now I'm going to click on this button over here. Oh, one thing I forgot to tell you and mention to you. Let's say that Gary's parents happen to be Spanish speaking, and that's primarily their Spanish. They can click on this button up here, and it translates it all into Spanish. You can see now it's in Spanish. So that's a way to help communicate those to those families that speak that have Spanish speaking in their families. I'm going back to the English. I'm going to now click on, I want to dig into this ELA report. So I see Gary struggling a little bit with ELA, so I want to dig in and see a little bit more about what information is provided regarding his ELA performance. I'm going to click on this View Detailed Report. And now you can see across, you still get the overall that was shown on the home screen and on that first screen. But now you see here we've got category results, progress, Lexile measure, resources to help your child. So I'm going to dig in a little deeper. Here's category results. On the ELA test, we have 3 reporting categories. reading informational text, reading literary text, writing and language. And I can see how the student performed on that and what level they're in. You can see that Gary is in below mastery. This tells me that I might want to address some things in this category, in all of these categories with my son, and talk with the teacher about what can the teacher do to help them. I'm going to click on the next one, progress. And on the progress, it's going to show, now in this case, because this is a demo, we only have 1 year's test for Gary. But if Gary had taken the test in 4th grade and say again in 3rd grade, those would all appear here, and there would be lines that would show his progress. How is he making progress? Is he gaining from grade 3 to grade 4 to grade 5? That's going to give some information again to the students, to the parents, so that they can see how the student is progressing across the grades. I think it's like maybe a limit of 3 grades at one time, but as they move up, they'll see the last couple of grades on this particular part. Now, the next part is the Lexile measure. Lexile reading measure describes a child's reading ability and also the difficulty of a text. In this case, we report Lexile measures. This Lexile measure is a different score from the actual score that the student gets, the scale score. And you can see on this one for Gary, his Lexile level is 735L. That's his Lexile. Now down here below it, there's what's called a growth planner. This is calculated based on where Gary's Lexile score is. And then there's a projection out as the student goes based on the research from Metametrics as to out in the on the bar at the side in that little green path is what's their level and their advancement, their path to certain readiness levels like university readiness level, community college readiness, and workplace readiness. In this case, what happens here is the student's Lexile score appears on this growth planner, and it tells the parent, okay, the projected path for this student right now is that dotted line. And if the student just stays without any kind of interventions on that, they will not reach up into that green level or reach up to that readiness bar. The black line is the path that they need to be on to get up into that green by the time they graduate in 12th grade. So it gives them some information. And there's a similar chart that's available for math with regard to quantiles. Also, there's resources to help your child. If you remember back under category results, we talked about the reporting categories. For English language arts, we had reading informational text, reading literary text, and writing and language. For math, there's a different set. For science, there's a different set. And what this resource panel will show them, what do these results mean? So if in this case, Gary scored a 574, which is in the does not meet, there's a little description of what that means, what that student is able to do or not able to do. And then there's some next steps that are suggestions for the parents of what they might be able to do with the student to help them to make some improvements. Now on the Lexile page, there also are under the ELA, down at the bottom, there's also a custom book list that gives some recommendations of different books at different Lexiles so that the parent can look at the student's Lexile score and try to identify material that's close around that to help them to pick some materials to read and to advance. There's ways that they can go over here and print the resources. There's also a glossary up here at the top that will show different terms that they can access if they want to know what the terms mean that are being used. There also is a guide that will show what does all of these different parts of the report, what do they mean? The parent would just have to click on like, okay, they're number 1, that's overall. Well, what's number 2? What does that mean? And that's the reporting results category. So it gives them an explanation of what these different reports mean. So that's a very basic demonstration of the portal. And as I said, I'm not going to go out and show the math and the science, but you're going to find similar information. And at this point, I'll open it up for any questions.
Questions, anyone? Mrs. Sullivan.
Thank you so much, Dr. Rudy. We've moved a long way from the little boats. I loved those.
I thought about that too. That's my first thought.
But it's very comprehensive. It is somewhat complicated. What do you do for families who do not have access to computers to pull all this?
That's a very good question. So there's a couple of things that they can do. Okay, one, they can get it on their phone. If they have a smartphone, and they have access to that, they can get the same information on their phone once the scores are out. Now, I just have to have the access code, the date of birth, and the child's first name. That's one thing. Another is they can go to the school, and hopefully the school will be able to, if like a parent may say, I don't have a computer at home, but I'd like to see my child's scores. They can go into the school can take them to a computer, set them up. They can go to a friend's house. They can go to the public library if the library has computers with internet. Those are some things. Now, eventually, right now, they could print out one of these pages also. So if you go back to, let me go back to the, let's go back to the home page. On this particular home page, there is a print button up here. So they could print that and give that out to them, and it just gives that same summary that they see on the screen. So that's one way that they could do that. And they can print some of the other screens as well. But there also is going to be, did I get out of the? I must have clicked out of it. That's okay. I don't need to show it anymore. There's also going to be a button that will say after June 30th, there'll be another button that says detailed report. That is going to be where they, those printed reports that we used to send home, they can also print those out. And the schools will also receive those, and the county will receive those. Now, they won't be available until the June 30th because one of the things that we don't have on there right now that won't be coming in is the average state, district, and school averages, or the aggregate data. We don't want to put that out right now because that's being suppressed until like June 30th, because that's going to constantly change as students complete the test over the state at different times. That information is going to change, and we don't want that to be misleading. We don't want somebody to put out there and say, "Oh, my school is 75% proficient," when in actuality, when the accountability results come out, they may only be 50% proficient. We don't want that to be confusing. But there are ways that they can send reports home to the students.
And I assume that the teachers and principals have access to each individual student's scores as well as class scores.
Yes, they do. They can get in there and they can look at each. And so if, as a parent, let's say, Gary were my child and I wanted to go in after getting this and I saw that he was struggling in English language arts, I might call the school and call his teacher and say, I'd like to come in and talk to you about his, and go in, and they can actually sit down and go over his scores, and they can see how that student did. They get access to all of that. They can see, even teachers, when they create rosters, one thing we recommend that they create rosters like for your classroom. So you can then see how all the kids in your class did. You can see how the class did on it as a whole as well, and how that compared to the school, how your roster did, and also the performance of each individual student.
Very good. I think on the other platform you used, you collected numbers of hits on the system.
Right. We did try to do that with the vendor. We're talking about the video reports, and we didn't get very good results with that. We're actually going to have a dashboard with this because it's with our testing vendor that has this particular thing. We can actually go in and see how many times that these have been accessed, where they were accessed, were they accessed on the phone, were they accessed on a computer, that kind of thing. We'll be able to see that.
And you mentioned the state level scores and the county level scores. With all the in and out that's going on right now with homeschool and Hope and the various permutations that we're experiencing right now, we hear and we know that there are students who are enrolled in the school for a little while, they leave for whatever reason, they come back, they're in and out. What happened? I think you have the full-time equivalent student or whatever, 130.
Full academic year student, 135 days.
isn't that getting awfully hard to keep track of with all the in and out of individual students?
It is, but it's based upon that end of year enrollment. So there are ways that our WVIS office calculates all of that, and they keep track of it. But I'm sure they're struggling with that.
I'm sure they are, and I'm sure that counties often feel that they're taking hits for students who have not been in their school for a certain length of time,
Right.
or who are even in and out and yet add up to 135 days,
Right.
and that they're getting dinged for.
But if they're not in the end of the year enrollment file, they won't get dinged for that. So
Well,
That's-
I know it's a concern.
yeah, it is.
Just a quick question on the score. I'm also an English major. So the scoring of the writing portion, how is that done?
So we use an automated scoring engine with our vendor that has been trained with sample student papers. We've been doing AI scoring with our writing assessment since 2005. So when a student sits down and composes their essay and submits it, the AI, the automated scoring engine, goes through and has been trained on the rubric, been trained with sample papers, and then it will assign a score. There are sometimes there are certain things that students might do that might cause the computer to say, I'm not sure what you're doing here. They will calculate what they call condition code. So for example, if a student just simply types the prompt over exactly as it was given, that will get flagged and it won't get scored. If a student does something else that's a condition code, like they duplicate the text or something, those get flagged, and some of the papers that get flagged go to hand scoring. So we have a subcontractor with our vendor that does all of our hand scoring, and they will do that. Now, to make sure that we are validating those engine scores, a random 5% of all papers are routed to hand scoring, 5% per grade level are routed to hand scoring. And then the computer also can score papers based on how it's been trained, but sometimes it'll see an unusual paper and it may have what they call low confidence. And if that confidence drops below a certain percentage, like 15%, those papers are automatically routed to hand scoring as well.
Good. Well, we'll look forward to hearing how the big launch goes and how well it's being used. It's good to have a product, but it needs to be used.
Right.
So,
and I think that, we're hoping, of course, that since we actually launched this fully in the fall, that's how we wanted the parents and the students to access their scores from last year, that many parents will already be familiar with it. The only catch is we want to inform them and make sure that we communicate with them. And we've been working with Christy's office to make sure we get some communication out. We'll also work with our counties and our schools to communicate to the parents to say, okay, not only, yes, you did that in the fall, but now this time you're going to be able to do it almost as soon as they take that test, like the next day. You can go in there and see how they're doing. And that way they can then look at it, see what they need to do, and maybe talk to their teachers, their children's teachers, to see what they can do to help.
And charter school students are public school students.
Yes.
And they all take this.
Yes.
The GSA.
Yes.
And I remember you discussing before the machinations that you and your staff went to watch the virtual testing.
Yes.
So this goes on for over a month, the window. So your staff is doing all that?
Yes,
oversight?
we do. What we do is each county will set its testing window, including the charter schools will set their testing window as to when they're going to test. Also have to send us links, the virtual charter have to send us links so that we know when they're testing, and then we click on that, we go in and we can monitor them. For the other schools, my staff actually goes out at randomly different places. And we actually go and sit in on the testing and go into the schools, and we talk to the principal and make sure that everything is followed properly. So we do all of that monitoring.
And are any of the non-accredited private schools in West Virginia using the GSA?
I'm not sure what you mean by non-accredited.
Well, there are 139 or so, and I'd have to look. There are accredited private schools and non-accredited private schools. There are 25 accredited private schools. There are the balance?
I'm not sure about the credited or non-credited.
Okay.
What we do is we work with Dustin Lambert, who oversees the
Right.
non-publics and the homeschools, and he sends out a letter or a memo, an email to all of those schools, usually in August, that invites them.
Inviting them.
And
Okay,
then
good.
they have to request to participate. They have to submit to us a list of their personnel that they're going to be using for testing, because we have to make sure that they're certified. And then we review that, and then we either approve them or deny them, as long as they meet our deadline, which is like in September. And then we set their schools up for testing, and they participate just like the other schools do.
And do homeschoolers have access to the general summative assessment?
Homeschool students also can request. They notify their county of their intent to participate in our general summative assessment, or if they're in 11th grade, the SAT. They can notify the county and say yes, and then we set them up. They submit a request with, we get a list from the county with all the names of the students. We assign an ID number for them, and then those students are put into the system so that they can test as well. Those often go into a school to take the test, or the county sets up a location for them to come to. There's different options there.
Well, it would just be interesting to know how many of our non-public school students, what percentage of our non-public school students, including home and private, are taking these tests. So that's just another.
We can get those
You can do
numbers,
that.
yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Anyone else? Questions with Dr. Rudy? Thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
Next on our agenda is the Mingo County Schools Special Circumstance Review. Ms. Kreiner.
Good morning, President White, Vice President Gabriel, Superintendent Blatt, members of the board. The Office of Accountability began conducting a special circumstance review in Mingo County Schools on February 17th of this year at the direction of the state superintendent. The purpose of the review was to examine County Board of Education member effectiveness and to verify compliance with all state and local policies and West Virginia Code. The review is ongoing, but we were asked to provide an update to this board today on the findings thus far. To date, we have interviewed most of the central office staff and all 5 board members. We've also reviewed board meeting agendas, minutes, and recordings, and we've received calls from various stakeholders in Mingo County. To date, we have identified initial findings related to the County Board of Education member meetings and procedures and board superintendent relations. A public report of all findings will be released at the conclusion of the review. The Office of Accountability has received and responded to a plethora of calls, emails, and letters dating back to 2022, consisting of allegations of misconduct against specific personnel. When taken as a whole, this pattern of complaints and infighting amongst the adults paints a picture of a school system, and most importantly, the children within that system caught in a political crossfire. The progress that has been made in academic achievement and the hard work of the students and staff have been overshadowed. The team has assessed that decisive action is needed on the part of this board to ensure that student achievement and well-being become and remain the priority. At this time, I would like to request the board commence an executive session to discuss the specific findings of the review and consider the appropriate next steps.
Thank you very much. Do I hear a motion to enter into executive session?
I move we enter into executive session under the personnel, privacy, and attorney-client privilege exceptions authorized by the West Virginia Code 69A3 for discussion of items B and C on the agenda.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Mr. Dunleavy. Any discussion, any further discussion? All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We will enter into executive session at 10:49 a.m. Meeting back to order. We have returned from executive session. Let the record reflect that the board returned at 12:45 without taking any action. We will return to further consideration of item B, Mingo County Schools Special Circumstance Review. So, Superintendent Blatt, do you have a recommendation?
Yes, I would like to ask that the West Virginia Board of Education declare that extraordinary circumstances exist in Mingo County schools that warrant immediate intervention pursuant to West Virginia Code 18-2E5. Number 2, that non-approval status shall be assigned to Mingo County schools, that the conditions precedent to WVB intervention in a county school system exist, and delaying the intervention would not be in the best interest of the students or staff of Mingo County schools. That the Mingo County Board of Education failed to act on a statutory obligation which interrupted the day-to-day operations of the school system. That the authority of the Mingo County Board of Education shall be limited in areas that comprise the delivery of a thorough and efficient education to its students as designated by WVBE by rule, which may include but is not limited to delegating decision-making authority regarding these matters to the state superintendent or her designee. That the WVBE declares the office of the County Superintendent of Mingo County Schools be vacated at the end of the business day on June 30th, 2025, and that thereafter the state superintendent shall appoint a county superintendent of Mingo County Schools. That the WVBE delegates to the state superintendent or her designee the authority to fill positions of administrators and principals with individuals determined by the state superintendent or her designee to be the most qualified for the positions. That the WVBE grants the state superintendent or her designee the authority to take action necessary to correct the extraordinary circumstances. That the WVBE voids the authority of the Mingo County Board of Education as to finances, personnel, federal programs, and any other areas designated by the WVBE by rule, and delegate decision authority to the state superintendent or her designee regarding those matters. That the WVBE delegates to the state superintendent or her designee the authority to conduct hearings on personnel matters, the referral of investigations to other agencies, and the authority to appoint a designee for the limited purpose of conducting hearings while reserving to the state superintendent the authority to render the resulting decision if needed. That the WVBE voids the authority of Mingo County Board of Education as to the ability to conduct real estate transactions and delegate to the state superintendent the authority to act in lieu of the Mingo County Board of Education in a transfer, sale, purchase, or other transaction regarding real estate. That the WVBE delegates to the state superintendent or her designee the authority to replace administrators and principals in low-performing schools and to transfer them to alternate professional positions within the county at her discretion. That the WVBE delegates to the state superintendent the authority to fill positions of administrators and principals with individuals determined by the state superintendent to be the most qualified for the position. And that the WVBE directs the current and future Mingo County superintendents and the state superintendent, after consultation with the Mingo County Board, to jointly develop and present to the WVBE at a future meeting a set of standards and/or strategic plan that must be implemented in order for the Mingo County Board of Education to regain control of the school system. And finally, that the WVBE directs the current and future Mingo County superintendents to provide written and/or oral progress reports to the WVBE as requested.
Is there a motion to declare that a state of emergency exists in Mingo County schools and to accept and approve the recommendations offered by Superintendent Blatt?
So move.
For intervention. What do you think for intervention?
For an intermediate intervention.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. Is there a second? It's been moved by Mr. Gabriel, seconded by Ms. Sullivan. Is there any further discussion? All in favor, aye. What? Paul, did you have a?
I do.
Okay.
Thank you, Madam President. I have went back and forth with this issue for a long time. I live in close proximity to the affected county.
And I went back and did a little bit of research. In 1998, the state of West Virginia, the West Virginia Board of Education took over Mingo County Schools for the first time for a period of about 4 years through 2002. 2002, Mingo County Board got control back. They managed to keep it for 3 years. 3 years. 2005, the state goes back into Mingo County Schools and takes over once again. This time for a period of 9 years. And the reason they took over, there's a consistent theme in all of that. It lies in number 4 of the superintendent's recommendation that the Mingo County Board of Education failed to act on a statutory obligation which interrupted the day-to-day operations of the school system. That is a constant, reoccurring fact in each of the takeovers of Mingo County schools. And that's unfortunate. And I'll close with this. Winston Churchill says that those who do not learn from history are doomed to repeat it. Ladies and gentlemen, today, March 12, 2025, we have unfortunately repeated history. And that's sad. Our children deserve far better. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hardesty. Any other comments? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next item is the approval of personnel matters, and we'll just address both the West Virginia Board of Education and the West Virginia Department of Education personnel matters together. Is there a motion that these that are attached, included in attachment, be approved? It's been moved by Dr. Stansberry, seconded by Mr. Dunleavy. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. West Virginia Department of Education reports. Superintendent Blatt.
Thank you. We are, where's Deputy White had to leave to go over to the legislature. We are halfway through today of the legislative session. As of today, we've had 16 bills pertaining to education that have actually either crossed over to the House or vice versa. So 16 that are on track to make the deadlines for passage. On the 18th of this month will be when the House can no longer introduce bills, and on the 24th is when the Senate can no longer originate bills from their committees. April 12th is the last day of the session this year. So we're continuing to monitor and work closely with the different leadership and the chairmen of the various committees and follow through that process. The second thing I wanted to mention was, of course, everyone's aware of the flooding and stuff that has occurred in our counties and the impact that it has had on multiple counties. McDowell and Mingo County, of course, being hit the hardest. But we were happy to report that on Tuesday, all of our students were back in school and started full time and were able to be in our buildings. While there was significant loss across those counties in all of those communities, we were fortunate in the fact that our school buildings themselves were not impacted. But we're continuing to provide any type of support or anything that we can do to help those schools as they recover. And then on a positive note, we had the Science and Engineering Fair at the Civic Center this week. We had 190 students chosen to present, and it's just amazing to listen to these different young students present that research and the things that they do on these projects. It will just blow your mind, some of the research and the medical things that they've investigated and that they've worked on. And so we're just continuing to look forward, as Dr. Rudy mentioned, with the assessments and things coming up, and there's lots of other fairs and things that will be happening across the state over the next several weeks. And then last night we were able to recognize 70 of our teachers who received national board certification. So that concludes my report.
Very good. Thank you. Anybody have a question for Superintendent Blatt?
I was just wondering, and I know this is just happening, but have you felt any impact yet of the U.S. Department of Education's slashing?
Right. So we've been in close communication with all of our contacts at the various offices, and then I've been working closely with CCSSO, which is the State Superintendents Association, on updates and things that they've had. Of course, yesterday we learned that they cut 50% of the staff. So we have not been able to reach out to our contacts yet. I mean, I'm sure some of our offices have. I've just not been able to follow up as to what has occurred. But I know that our national organization is following that closely, and the communication I got from them is to ensure us that, our programs such as for special education and our Title I schools and things like that would not be impacted. We did receive some information on some grants and things the other day, and so we're trying to check up on those.
Next item on the agenda are the member updates and requests for information. We'll begin with Mr. Hardesty. Do you have anything?
I have nothing.
I do. I'm sorry. I attended the state girls basketball tournament, Title IX in action, as Mr. Blackwell reminded us, and that was wonderful, and hope to be able to go back. I also attended a session on the budget, the governor's budget, that was presented by the West Virginia Center on Budget and Policy. And it was really fascinating. And of course, they talked about the whole thing, but they had a slide on the $110 million that is going to help scholarships and alternative uses of that $110 million. And that included $3,000 raise for current teachers and school nurses. That would be $51.6 million. Hiring 250 additional school counselors at $15.5 million. Hiring 100 additional school psychologists, $7.3 million. $2,000 raise for current bus drivers, that's $8.3 million. Hiring 250 additional school social workers, that would be $14.3 million. And hiring 200 additional special ed teachers, $12.2 million. So that's how that $110 million going to Hope could be used alternatively to help our public schools. I was also delighted to see a full page, and I had to cut it out. Promo, explanation, whatever, from Cabell County Schools. It was in the Charleston Gazette this past weekend, talking about all the things that their public schools and our public schools statewide are. And it was just a reminder to me that 90% of our school-age children are choosing to attend public schools. So I just wanted to compliment Cabell County on taking the step to do that.
Dr. Stansford?
Nothing for me, thank you.
Mr. Wooten?
Nothing, thank you.
Next item on the agenda is future meetings. Our next regular meeting will be here at the Board of Education, Department of Education building on April 9th, 2025 in Charleston. Next item is adjournment. Is there a motion to adjourn? Moved by Mr. Wooten. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Gabriel. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. At 12:59, are adjourned.